Achieving the Dream webinar about the federal financial aid policy changes. I'm starting a bit early to go over the technology pieces of the webinar. So this is just a cut and dry kind of review of how to use GoToWebinar. I'm just going to take a few minutes to explain this, and then we'll move on to the main presentation. In particular, I'd like to just show you some of the features that allow us to make our conversation and presentations more interactive. You should each see the control panel on your screen right now. It should look like the one in the slide here. Oops, sorry about that. There we go. It should look like this. And if for some reason you don't see it, it could be that it's been minimized, and you can pull it back out by going to the Grab tab, which hides and shows the control channel. There's also an attendee list that you can see the participants on the call, so you can see which ones of your colleagues are participating. And there's also a hand. If you have a question, you can raise your hand by clicking on the hand icon on the control panel, and I can go ahead and unmute your line so you can ask that question. Does everyone want to experiment or make sure they can do that by raising their hands right now? See a few hands raising. If everyone just wants to test out and raise their hands a little bit more. Yep. Oh, I see the hand coming in. Great. So it looks like most of us know how to raise our hands. So that's one way to ask questions. The other way to ask questions is by using the question pane, and you can type in a question, and I will receive your question, and I'll be able to read it so that the presenters can respond. All of the panes can be expanded or minimized by clicking the plus or minus button on the top left of each pane, and that's a good way to make sure you don't have too many things clogging up your screen. And finally, I just want to highlight that in the past we have had some audio trouble. So if for some reason you are having trouble, you'll want to make sure that you are not muted on your personal phone, or perhaps you need to enter the audio pin, which is provided to you at the beginning of the call when you call in. In a worst case scenario, you can always hang up and call back in, and just be sure to enter that audio pin that is given to you when you call in. With that, we're just going to wait about another minute, and we'll get started with the main presentation. Okay, it's 12:30, so we are going to get started with the presentation. This is the webinar to go over the recent changes to federal financial aid policy and the implications that this has for community college students. Achieving the Dream is very excited to have you all joining us. And right now, I'd like to turn it over to Rachel Singer, our Vice President of Community College Relations and Applied Research, to kick us off.
Good afternoon, and it is afternoon. I hope folks are having a good day so far. We want to thank you all very much for joining us today. We're really excited about today's call. And I want to welcome you all and thank you for taking the time to join us. And we'll get started in just a few minutes, but I want to get into some ATD business before we do that. What I'd like to do first is talk to you about leading by example. We'd like to send out congratulations to our 14 Achieving the Dream institutions that have been honored by the League for Innovation. We usually do this on our Leader College calls. This is the section where we give recognition to leader colleges, how they have set examples to be recognized in our network as leading the way in community college reform and student success. And so if you look on your screen, you can see the names of those colleges. We're delighted around the work that they have done, and I would ask everyone to take some time to go on the websites of these community colleges and look at some of the good work that's happening on their campuses. I'd also like to congratulate the 4 Achieving the Dream institutions that have been named finalists for this year's Aspen Prize for Community College Excellence. We were delighted of the 10 top Aspen Prize finalists for our ATD colleges. You can see those on your screens as well, and we'd really like to congratulate them. Just getting into the top 10 is terrific recognition in itself. So congratulations to the Aspen Prize finalists. I'd also like to remind you that the call for workshop proposals for DREAM this year is live, and you can see the attachment online where you can get the proposal RFP, and they're due by close of business Friday, September 28th. We really encourage folks to look on the website and look at the link where the proposal RFP is, and to think really deeply and seriously about making sure that you propose something that you think others in the network would be interested in, and we really look forward to your ideas and your innovations around the work at your colleges. So now we'd like to get to the presentation. I'd like to introduce first, as you can see, Megan McClean, part of the National Association of Student Financial Aid Administrators, Joan Zanders, Northern Virginia Community College, and Sonia Caesar, Community College of Baltimore County. They will be our presenters today. We're really delighted and excited that they've been able to join us. So without any further hesitation or any other talk, we'd like to get the presentation started. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thanks for the introduction. This is Megan here, and I just want to let you know sort of up front that in the short time I have with you this afternoon, I'm going to provide just a brief overview of the major changes that have happened to student aid policy over the last year or so. But I think more importantly, what I'd also like to do is provide you with some context as to why all these changes occurred and why they occurred over such a short period of time. We often see at the federal policy level that, especially in the past year or so, history has repeated itself in terms of a lot of bills going through and the manner in which they go through and how quickly they go through and all the changes they yield. So we really feel like it's very important to educate folks on why some of this stuff is happening. But I do want to just at first give you a little bit of background information about NASFA because I hope, you know, I should back up and say that I'm sure some of you are NASFA members. And for those of you who are not, I hope that you can still find us a resource. Just a brief background, we are the association in DC that does represent student financial aid administrators. All in all, we represent nearly 18,000 financial aid administrators and almost 2,800 institutions of higher education. Many of the schools that we do represent are community colleges, so we're very familiar with that constituency and do a lot of work in that area. Our mission very broadly is to support the training, diversity, and really professional development of financial aid administrators, but also from a policy level advocating for policies and programs that increase access to and success in post-secondary education. And then finally serving as a forum for communication about relevant student aid issues, and that's exactly what we're doing here today. So we're glad to be doing that. Next slide, please. Okay. A brief agenda of what I'm going to go over, and I just have a few moments with you, but we'll talk a little bit about why some of these changes occurred. And I do want to give you summaries of the major changes that we did see in the calendar year 2011 that are really playing out in this current year. We'll talk a little bit about what's next, what you can expect for the future, and then also we want to discuss how you can get involved in advocacy efforts around these issues. Next slide, please. So this is just this slide here, and I'm glad to see these little scissors are moving. I didn't realize it was interactive, but that's a nice touch. Just says budget, 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 and the reason that that is important is the federal budget is the reason for all of the student aid changes that have occurred over the past year or so. All of the changes primarily occurred within 3 major budget bills. That's not usually the way that we like to see things happen because we would rather changes to student aid policy go through the education committees where it's traditionally a more thoughtful and deliberative process. You have folks on the education committees that are very interested in education. They have staff who are very interested in education, and we prefer that changes happen that way. What we've seen over this past year, and you've heard it all in the news, deficit reduction, cut, 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 the budget, very much buzzwords that we're hearing in the media. Everything's been on the table, and our programs have been wrapped up in that. One more thing I'll just say about that, the other danger with major changes going through budget bills is that budget bills often happen very quickly. From an advocacy perspective, it's very hard to sort of make headway and influence people and sort of stop the bills from moving through, and so that's another reason why they are problematic to us. Next slide, please. Next slide. Thank you. So very quickly, I'm going to go through just, and again, these are very brief, and we could almost spend a whole hour on just covering the changes that happened last year. But there were 3 budget bills that passed in calendar year 2011 that all made changes. The first one was a fiscal year 2011 budget bill, and that passed back in April 2011. And again, you're already seeing some of these changes play out on your campus. The big things that happened here were we saw the elimination of the year-round Pell Grant. Year-round Pell Grant, or the ability to have students have 2 Pells in a scheduled award year, was a very short-lived program. The idea was that this would help students accelerate if they could receive another Pell Grant. At the end of the day, and this is the point I was making earlier about all of this being tied up with the budget, folks came to realize that this program was very expensive and unfortunately just too expensive to sustain in an era where everyone is focused on deficit reduction. As a result, it was eliminated in this bill. We also saw a 0.2% across-the-board cut. This impacted other student aid programs, and I apologize that I just have the acronyms here because I know some of you may not be familiar. But SELG is a Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant, and then FWS is Federal Work Study. So we saw just some sort of across-the-board cuts there. And I know that as supplemental information, you all have a chart that really outlines in greater detail what these changes were, and so you can reference it there as well. This bill also zero-funded the LEAP and BIRD scholarship. The LEAP program is a leveraging educational assistance program, and both of these programs got zero funding in the 2011 budget bill. So that was also a hit for institutions and for students. Next slide, please. This is one that you probably all remember. Last year, just around this time, the Budget Control Act passed, so August of last year. And this is the bill that we heard a whole lot about in the news related to the debt ceiling and were we going to default on our debt. Some major changes happened for student aid programs in this bill, the big one being that it eliminated the graduate student interest subsidy. Also, there was an elimination of direct loan repayment incentives. The big deal here, though, and why it's important for you all as you serve community college students, is that while we were disappointed to see the elimination of the graduate student interest subsidy, most of the savings that came from eliminating that provision did go toward the Pell Grant program. In entirety, this bill was very much a deficit reduction bill. So in that sense, we were very glad to see that we were able to take some of those savings and put them into the Pell Grant program versus eliminating the subsidy and putting it all toward deficit reduction. Next slide, please. The most recent budget bill that we had, which was for fiscal year 2012, which I should have mentioned earlier that these are always kind of forward funded. So fiscal year 2012 impacts the 12-13 award year. We saw some major changes to student aid programs in this bill. Most of these changes were wrapped up in securing funding for the Pell Grant. So all these changes occurred to plug a Pell Grant shortfall that we had that was $1.3 billion. So let me go through these again rather quickly, and we can reference you to resources on our website afterward if you want to dig in a little more deeper. And also I know that you have a very nice chart that gets into these issues. But the first thing here on this slide you can see is that we saw a reduction in the minimum Pell Grant. We also saw a reduction of lifetime Pell Grant eligibility going down from 18 semesters to 12 semesters. The ability to benefit was eliminated as an eligibility measure for Title IV aid, so students could previously take an ability to benefit test if they did not have a high school diploma, or they could show that they had successfully completed 6 courses of post-secondary work in order to qualify for federal student aid. And this was called ability to benefit, and again was a measure for students to be able to receive federal aid if they did not have a high school diploma, and this provision was eliminated. We also saw a reduction in something called the auto zero threshold, and this is a provision where if you went in, it is reduced to $23,000, as you can see here. The law prior to it would set that threshold at $30,000, but instead reduce it to $23,000. And then we also saw a temporary repeal of the interest subsidy during grace period. So for a 2-year period, students who take out loans from on or after July 1, 2012 or through July 1, 2014 will no longer receive a subsidy on their loans during the grace period time. Next slide, please. And then finally, this is most recent and probably most fresh in folks' mind, is that we had a bill that passed this summer that was actually attached to a bigger transportation bill that focused on the subsidized Stafford loan interest rate. If nothing was done, if this bill wasn't passed, on July 1, the interest rate for the subsidized Stafford loan would have increased from 3.4% to 6.8%, so a doubling. A bill did go through that extended the 3.4% for an additional year. And again, that's just a very temporary fix, and we'll have to deal with this issue again next year. The other thing that it did was limit eligibility for subsidized loans to 150% of program length. So that's something to keep in mind and something that will certainly impact students. Next slide, please. I know I want to keep in mind time here. I know that I'm already close to going over a little bit, but just to give you an idea of what's coming down the pike, 3 big things that we have up here. Of course, the first that none of us could ignore, even if we wanted to, is the fact that we have a very big election coming up. The reason this is important for the work that we all do is just that we're not seeing a whole lot get done now in Congress, and that's pretty typical of an election year. Before Congress leaves town next week, they are going to pass a continuing resolution for fiscal year 2013 for the budget for that year, which will essentially fund programs at the same level as fiscal year 12, so this past year. So no major changes, no big cuts, or also no big increases, just sort of keeping things level funded, really just kicking the budget down the road until after the election so folks don't have to deal with it now. There's also the issue of sequestration. This is a provision that is going to enact across-the-board cuts beginning January 1, 2013. And this is a result of the Budget Control Act back in August. If you all remember, the super committee that was established was supposed to come up with their own version of cuts in order to avoid a situation where there were across-the-board cuts, and they could not do that. So this sequestration is going to go into place. There are many people who feel that Congress will do something to stop this from happening because it would have a pretty devastating impact on our programs in particular, but they likely will not deal with that until after the election. And then finally, just wanted to touch briefly on the fact that we do face again next year a Pell Grant shortfall. Last estimates, or the Pell Grant shortfall for next year, for fiscal year 14, would be close to $7 billion, which is very large. We have received some indication lately, some preliminary reports that the shortfall may not be as large due to not as many students using Pell and the numbers not being as high this year. But those are still preliminary, so we'll make sure we keep folks posted on that. Next slide. The last thing I want to say here, and I just want to put a little plug in, is that we are very big here at NASPA on grassroots advocacy and getting folks involved at the ground level. I know that not all of you are necessarily in financial aid offices, but you deal with students, and so by default you are close to folks who are experiencing these cuts and experiencing these changes, and so we encourage you to get involved, to write letters, to issue statements, to get the students involved, to have them tell their stories. We do a lot of that here at NASPA. You can visit our website, and we have a whole advocacy section and a whole take action and get involved section where you can sign on to letters. You can get ideas how to get your own students involved. We have a Facebook page that we use for advocacy purposes, and I'll just say broadly that it's been very successful for us in the past year or so to get folks involved on the ground level and sort of create that groundswell up on the hill, and I believe and in fact know that that has made a difference in a lot of the work that we've done. So I just encourage you all to do that, and you can always feel free to reach out to me if you want to learn some more ways to do that. So with that, I think I'm going to turn it over to the next person. So next slide, please.
Thank you, Megan. This is Joan Zanders from Northern Virginia Community College. One of the few constants in financial aid is change. Reauthorization used to be the primary impetus for that change, but not so in recent years. Consequently, the process for dealing with the constant change is similar every year because every year we have those changes. We must be proactive in a reactive scenario. Our first step is always the review and adjustment of our policies and procedures, followed by training staff on those changes so that they might better help students. We train not only financial aid staff, but other NOVA staff who work closely, especially with some of our high-risk student groups, like Pathway to the Baccalaureate, Adult Career Pathways, GPS for Success, and our community business partnerships. This year, with 600% of Pell becoming the maximum, our packaging plan continues to assist students who have maxed out or are approaching the limits of Pell Grant by providing state and institutional grant monies depending on the student's unmet need. Loans, though of course not preferred, are another option. Students close to both limits are required to meet with an advisor or a counselor to develop an academic plan, which we call a roadmap to completion. The plans help students use what remaining funds they have more wisely to complete their programs of study. The ability to benefit issue is a bit more challenging for us simply because these are students that are just starting their programs, and it's really hard to fund that amount of money that would allow them to finish. They really need to either find other alternative sources of funding or complete their GEDs. Communicating the changes to students and staff is always our biggest challenge. Email is still our primary communication tool, but we know that that is not nearly enough, and we now have a comprehensive integrated communications plan. NOVA is a school of 6 full campuses and over 78,000 students from over 180 countries and a substantial extended learning institute. Not quite 2 years ago, we hired an assistant director for communications who didn't speak financial aidese to help address the challenges of reaching students with that financial aid message. Slide 3, please. We use just 3 basic print documents: an instructional postcard, our financial aid handbook, which is our little B-Bible, and a simplified pamphlet on the financial aid process. When changes occurred this last year with program integrity issues, we prepared for students and staff the Satisfactory Academic Progress pamphlet and the Return to Title IV visuals you see on the right side of the screen. They really needed some additional instruction. These are also online documents as well as in print. But to speak for what Megan was saying, the return to Title IV policy is really bad regulation, and it is a place for colleges to get involved. We're working diligently from our end to change it, but we need a chorus of voices chiming in on this one to get that policy changed. I think the department recognizes it as bad policy, but nothing has changed yet. Our Financial Aid Support Center is available to students 24/7, 365. Students can access a self-service knowledge-based financial aid tracker that tells students where they are in the process. They can initiate a chat, a ticket, a phone call. We embed on our website financial aid TV video clips on general financial aid topics, and each year add a few customized videos pertinent to NOVA. Next slide, please. We have a quarterly newsletter, the Greenback, which provides timely financial aid information to students, articles to the faculty, staff, intercom assists staff in understanding pertinent financial aid issues. NOVA Financial Aid also is on Facebook, Twitter, and we have a financial aid blog. Next slide. Integrated communications provide consistent information to support the goals of NOVA Financial Aid and the college as a whole. Whether the issues are ongoing or drastic changes like we have seen of late, the goals remain the same. We want to provide that outreach to inform students, to provide access, and to provide a high level of customer service throughout the process. We're certainly not yet where we want to be in all areas, but we are anything but complacent in the quest. And I will pass this to our next speaker.
Sonia, are you there?
Yes, I am. I thought it was, okay, I'm sorry. Hello, all.
Okay. Go ahead.
Hello, all. My name is Sonia Caesar, and I'm happy also to be joining you on this very important topic. I am a member of the Community College of Baltimore County's Achieving the Dream core team, and I also work with financial literacy initiatives here at the college. And I find it, I have to point out that I'm not working with the financial aid department in particular, but I do work very closely with them on a number of different initiatives. I'd like to begin by just giving a very brief background about CCBC's journey with financial literacy as well as financial aid-related efforts. What we did in response to the number of students that face, economic challenges here at the college was to develop a financial literacy subcommittee of our ATD core team. And the first order of business with that team was creating this financial literacy committee and getting a group of people around the table that would, be able to kind of really dive into this effort. And the members included people from financial aid, developmental education, the business faculty, continuing education, as well as student services. And how we decided to first tackle our order of business was that faculty would often share that they were frustrated at not understanding financial aid policies and how it impacted the students in the classroom. So we decided to try to demystify and provide some clarity to, to faculty in the classroom. And we created what we called our financial aid cheat sheet. And it included a few frequently encountered situations that would happen in the classroom with easy to understand, and I put that in quotation marks, responses given the complexities of financial aid. And you can see an example of that on the screen right now. In terms of disseminating the information, this was brought up at all the different department meetings. Our VP of Instruction shared this electronically, and we had it in PDF versions with the deans, department chairs, as well as other program coordinators. I thought it was helpful to include that. I'm not at that slide yet. I'm still at that first one. I thought it was important to include that because it's a cheap and very quick way of spreading the word if you're trying to get something out there. And a copy of this is available after the presentation. In continuation with this theme, you can go to the next slide. The core team also was very concerned about responding to the newly revised policies very quickly. There's an emphasis on the quick because we know that those policies were retroactive. So at the end of the semester, our VP met with all of the department chairs, deans, that type of thing again, with a presentation solely devoted on this topic to spread the word out from the top, the people that were in charge of these departments to the faculty members. In addition, there's the financial aid TV that was mentioned by Nova. We also have that here to provide a visual element for students to better understand some of the terms and language that are associated with financial aid. Additionally, we also did something similar to what Nova did. We have a number of different academic advising policies that help students one-on-one with getting through that completion. As we go to the next slide really quickly, you can see another effort that was done through our financial aid gurus, with our financial aid gurus in partnership with public relations to create some cards for students. And you can see the front of the card there. I won't bore you with the details because you can read them clearly. You can see on the next slide the back of what was included in that card. And finally, you can see the faculty version of what we provided on that card. And that wraps up my, I think I'm over by a couple of seconds, wraps up my piece here at CCBC.
Thank you so much to all of our presenters. I just want to highlight that Achieving the Dream has put together some resources regarding financial aid for our network. Everyone should have received kind of a summary handout before this call, and then here are some other websites that we thought would be particularly helpful. And again, this presentation will be sent out after this call, so you will have access to all of these resources. With that, I'd like to open the lines up, or the chat sessions up, to any questions that our audience might have. Again, I'll remind you, you can raise your hand and I can unmute you, or you can go ahead and type a question into the question pane. Just looking to see, does anyone have any questions? There is a question about the PowerPoint, and yes, this PowerPoint will be sent out afterwards. Kim McKay has a question. Kim, I'm going to go ahead and unmute your line. Are you there, Kim?
Yes, we're here. When we were listening to the presentation from Nova, one of the things that she said to us resonated, the fact that we have to be proactive to a reactive situation. Is NASPA preparing scenarios that there is a change in administration?
Megan?
Yeah, no, I'm here. That's a good question. I think what we've been doing here is just making sure that we are, following the campaigns and trying to understand what platforms are being put forth by both candidates. It's sort of hard to predict what will happen after the election, especially because a lot of it will depend not only on what happens with the presidential election, but also what happens with Congress as well. So, we're obviously trying to understand. We're pretty clear on what the Obama administration priorities are, and we've been trying to keep on top of what we understand the nominee Romney's positions to be. But other than that, it's kind of a wait and see. It's a good question, though.
Thank you.
Scrolling down to see if there are any questions. William Morrison, it looks like you have a question. I'm going to unmute your line.
Hi, this is Nancy Silvestro, not William Morrison, obviously. I was just wondering if there was any faculty resistance to giving out information about financial aid to their students, especially in the classroom.
That's a great question. And can I ask you where you're from before we answer your question?
Mm-hmm. We're from Passaic County Community College in Paterson, New Jersey.
Okay, great.
This is Joan Zanders from Nova. We try diligently to inform our faculty so that they can provide at least basic financial aid information to students, but I think you're absolutely correct. It is a very complicated topic, and oftentimes faculty feel like they don't know enough to give accurate information, and they're afraid they're going to make a mistake. I think in most instances they will send students down the hallway to the financial aid office.
Okay.
But we're trying. We're really trying to get the basic information out there so that they can at least warn students of what happens if they withdraw from classes or what happens if they don't successfully complete their classes.
Okay, thank you.
This is Sonia from Community College of Baltimore County. I think that I wouldn't say that we would necessarily experience resistance. I think what faculty realized was that they did have to kind of become a little bit more aware of what was happening because it will impact the classroom. If there's no one in the classroom to teach because they're all being cut out of this equation because of SAP, which is the Satisfactory Academic Progress, there will be no one to teach. So it's not an issue that's just, solely resides in the financial aid office. This impacts all of our well-being, including furloughs and other type things that, of course, come down the pike if you don't have enough people enrolled in the school. So I think what we try to approach it as is it's a holistic effort. It will involve everyone to get students on board and help them, stay compliant, really. So I don't think we've experienced at all resistance. In fact, I think our faculty want to know more.
Great.
I want to read a few of the questions that were given via the online question page. One of the first ones is from someone in Hawaii, and they asked to please describe an example of student testimony that positively altered congressional decisions about financial aid funding. I'm wondering, Megan, if you have any examples that you could share with us.
I sure do. Let me give you sort of one of the biggest examples that we had last year, and this wasn't just one single student, but rather an effort of a group of students. We did have a Save Student Aid Facebook page where we asked students to tell us their stories about Pell. What we did with that then was made a booklet out of it and actually combined stories by region, so that we went up to the Hill and had a booklet of testimonials about the Pell Grant and why it was important, and was able to highlight it by region. And Pell was a big effort, right? So we would never point back to this one document and say that it saved Pell, but I did have congressional staff tell me afterward that their member of Congress actually looked at that book, and one, I think, actually referenced it on the floor at one point. And so it goes to show you that those stories do make their way to the important people.
Great. Thank you so much for that answer. I have another question here from Jackson Community College, and they're asking, what are schools seeing as an impact on enrollment and persistence? So I'm assuming that it's, how are these changes in the federal financial aid having an impact on persistence or enrollment? I don't know if Sonia or Joan want to say a little bit about that.
I don't know that we have done research on the new issues to try to determine whether or not there's been impact. Our enrollment is up. I do know that we have now a warning term for students for satisfactory progress purposes, and I think that has really helped. I have had some of our counselors say they love it because students realize earlier that they're in trouble, and they put their noses to the grindstone and oftentimes will get themselves back out of satisfactory progress failure. With our academic plan, if a student does fail SAP and they then get back into an academic plan and an appeal is approved and they work that academic plan, then they can maintain financial aid even though they're not yet in good standing. So I think from that perspective it's been a positive in retention to help that student. And that's the whole goal, is to get the student back on track. It's not to punish the student.
At the Community College of Baltimore County, I think we've seen our enrollment kind of taper off, if not slightly decline, but not, drastically enough that we were very, very worried. But what I have seen, my office is housed within the Student Success Center, and I can look through the glass right now as I'm speaking to you all and see that the center is almost full. And I think what that speaks to is that students, the word is getting to faculty. Faculty are really realizing what the potential impact could be, and they're getting the messages out to the students, and the students are in turn getting more help and being a lot more proactive with their academics, in response to this. And kind of what Nova said, that they realize if they're on warning, this is their semester. The warning semester is their semester to, turn everything around almost and rectify what has been going wrong so that they don't lose their financial aid. So I think it is impacting students to become a lot more proactive with their academics.
Another issue that I did not mention, this is Joan again from Nova, was the year-round Pell. And I do think that not having that second Pell Grant available for students for summer enrollment did impact our summer enrollment. I don't know whether George could speak to that absolutely or not, or to know that that's the direct cause. But we do know that the year that we were offering a second Pell Grant in the summer, our enrollment was up.
Great, thanks for those answers. I'm going to take a question from Lori Trumbo. Lori, I'm unmuting your line if you want to go ahead and ask your question.
Actually, I was going to put more of a suggestion out there. At Greenville Tech, what we were told this summer about financial aid was not to answer any questions because they were worried that faculty would get it wrong because of all the changes. So what we're starting to do now in the fall is offer financial aid workshops specifically for faculty to start going over the changes so that we can answer the basic questions.
Thanks for that suggestion, Lori. That's I think workshops is definitely one way to get that information across, especially to faculty. I can imagine, CCBC, for example, where they have a lot of faculty, that could be particularly hard. Sonia or Joan, do you want to talk about how, maybe say a few words about how your faculty have received the information that you've put out and whether they, whether they've been using it and kind of giving the right information to students?
As I mentioned before, and you saw, you can go back and refer to the slides, they printed up cards here at CCBC that were designed directly to speak to faculty point of views, if you will. And we found that that's been very, very helpful. I think what faculty were concerned about was not so much the individual, the nitty-gritty type of things, but in the past, say, for example, if they'd said to a student, you're not doing so well, you probably should go ahead and withdraw, people were less hesitant to do that at this point, even if they didn't know all the ins and outs of what that ramification would have meant. So overall, I would say our approach has been the same as the young lady that just posed the advice piece out there, and that is to refer students to financial aid. But in the meantime, instead of giving advice and sending them to financial aid, kind of stop, cease and desist from providing advice about how to proceed in terms of their class, like withdraw, as I said, or, you might want to go ahead and take an audit because, audit the class meaning they wouldn't get a grade at the end of that class because you're not doing so well. They're more reluctant to do so because they know that doing so will have a significant ramification on their future eligibility for financial aid. So I think, if anything, us providing more information to the faculty was not to necessarily have them be so conversant in the classroom that they could advise the student, but instead, kind of give them pause in terms of providing advice about something they probably are not fully versed in.
Great, thanks for that, Sonia. I have a question here from Peg Moore, and Peg, I'm going to unmute you, and I hope that you'll ask the question that you typed in as well, because I think it's a wonderful question.
I'm actually sitting in for Peg. This is Ashley Benson.
Hi.
My question.
Sorry about that.
Hi. It's okay.
What college are you from?
North Central State College.
Okay, great. Go ahead.
Our question is, how, when the sequestration, if it goes through on January 2nd, how much money will financial aid lose potentially?
Great question. Megan, do you have a sense of that?
That is a great question, and we hopefully should have that answer this week, and let me tell you why. This has sort of been a question that we all have had and have never gotten a clear answer on, but OMB, the Office of Management and Budget, was directed to produce a report that would very clearly spell out what the cuts would look like. That report was actually due last Friday, but they got some sort of extension, so it should be out this week, and I will tell you that NASFA will definitely be reporting on that in our news. And for those of you, I assume that that will also be a public article, so I'm hoping that most of you would be able to access that. But let me just say the things that we do know, and again, these are a little bit broad. Most programs, it's our understanding, would receive about a 7.8% cut across the board. And so not just financial aid programs, but this includes defense and non-defense discretionary, so all discretionary funds. The one thing that we do know is that the Pell Grant would be protected within the first year of sequestration, but sequestration is a 10-year process. Pell would not be protected in the second year. So those are the things that we know right now, but like I said, we hope to know more, hopefully within the next couple of days.
Great, thanks, Megan. And I have another question here that I have a feeling you would be the one to answer. The question is from John, and he asks, is there any discussion related to the proposed legislation relating to Pell Grant amounts in relation to online coursework?
I think that might be the proposal that dealt with 2 separate costs of attendance. I'm pretty sure that's what you're referring to. No, we haven't seen any movement on that. That appeared in the Senate version of their FY13 budget bill, which did not go anywhere. It passed out of committee but did not go to the full Senate floor. And we haven't seen any other movement on that at this point. And this will likely not be brought up again until, actually, probably not until after the election and even after the new year. So we'd love to have feedback on that, though. It seems if you guys want to share that with us here at the NASA office, we're interested in what folks think about that.
Great. I just want to ask one more quick question. The question is, why are prior self-paid college credits considered in the calculation for 150% degree completion eligibility? So, Megan, is that actually the case?
I'm going to defer to Joan on this one.
Okay.
What we are supposed to do with Satisfactory Progress is if there are transfer credits that apply to the program of study. Are you speaking specifically of transfer credits? Or just any prior college credits?
Yeah, it looks like they're referring to transfer credits. It's not specific in the question, but yeah.
Yes, any credits accepted by the college are to count toward satisfactory academic progress calculations, which means both 67% and 150%.
Well,
for instance, the way the policy works is a student must complete the program of study within 150% of, or while attempting no more than 150% of the credits required for the program of study. Many colleges break that down so that if the student is completing at least 67% of credits each term, they will meet the 150% requirement. So there are actually 2 calculations. Other schools may use a little different percentage or have a sliding scale on the 67%. But yes, transfer credits do count.
Great, thank you for that. Unfortunately, we're going to have to kind of move towards wrapping up here. I'm going to do a poll here just to see where everyone falls on this. So if you could please select your choices, you can select more than one. But if you could please select your choices on the poll here to help us at Achieving the Dream get some feedback on the webinar. Still waiting for some people to vote. We only have about 40% voting. Let's wait a few more minutes. Great. I'm going to close the polls here soon, so put your votes in. Great. Thank you very much. As you can see in the results should be there, that most of you did find that this call was useful and informative and had an overall positive experience. And only a small percentage do not think that this met their expectations. So we're glad that that worked out. So with that, I just want to thank you for your participation, and please know that the recorded webinar will be posted on Achieving the Dreams YouTube channel, and we will email the link out in the next few days. And we will also be able to provide either a link or attach the presentation to the email so that everyone will have that. With that being said, I really want to thank you again for taking the time to participate in the webinar, and we look forward to talking to you further in future webinars. Thanks so much.
The organizer